Dominic Tang, Society of Jesus. How Inscrutable His Ways. Memoirs, 1951 to 1981. Preface. The Lord's abundant grace has led me, after experiencing innumerable difficulties and obstacles, to return at last in peace to the place of my birth, Hong Kong. Pen and ink are certainly powerless to express in the smallest degree the depth of my gratitude. In response to requests from Catholics of my diocese, I have set down in order the many events that have happened to me in the Archdiocese of Canton, Guangzhou, during the years 1951 to 1981, so that all the Catholics may understand the changes that took place in the diocese, and what I went through during those years, and the various difficult situations that occurred. More important is how our loving Father in heaven cared for our Canton Archdiocese through 1,000 dangers, and dealt kindly with his servant, bestowing many special graces. This is surely something that one who has not personally experienced it would find it hard to understand. How inscrutable his ways. Romans 11:33. These words I pen with respect and by way of preface. Chapter 1. The Appointment. One day in about November 1950, I received a large registered letter from Nanjing addressed to Catholic Church, 25 Sunman Middle Road, Sheki Town, Chongshan County, Guangdong Province. The letter was addressed to a Dominic Tang. I signed the receipt thinking, this must be a letter for me, but wrongly addressed to Dominic Tang. I opened the letter. It was from the Apostolic Internuncio, Archbishop Antonio Riberi, who was then in Nanjing. At the top of the letter in large red print were the words, Secretum Sancti Officii, Secret of the Holy Office. It read, Pope Pius XII has decided to appoint Dominic Tang as Apostolic Administrator of the Archdiocese of Canton, Guangzhou, with the rights and duties of a residential bishop. I, Riberi, hope you will comply with the desire of the Pope and generously accept the office, especially in the present special circumstances, when the communists have occupied China. When I read the letter, I not only felt surprised at its sudden arrival, but also immediately felt full of fear, because this was an unusually heavy responsibility. The next day I went immediately to Macau to see my superior, Father Anacleto Dias, Society of Jesus, who had been Jesuit provincial of the Portuguese province and rector of the Seminary of St. Joseph, Macau, for many years and was quite elderly. I told him why I had come and showed him the letter. After reading it, he said, The Holy See has knocked at your door now. The Pope has already asked a few priests, but they have refused. Now that he is asking you, think it over yourself. At that moment my thoughts were in conflict. On the one hand, I was reluctant to accept the appointment because we Jesuits do not become bishops. But I recalled that, at this time, many foreign bishops had been sent away from mainland China by the people's government, and moreover, there was not one Chinese bishop in South China. If I also refused to be bishop, then, it was to be feared, there would be no more bishops in South China. Would not this be a loss for the Church? For these reasons, I felt it difficult to make a decision. So I said I wanted to see the superior of Shuhing Zhaoqing, Father Elias Marshal. Father Marshal was the Jesuit superior in Shuing and was also the Vicar General of the Shuing Vicariate of Macau Diocese. However, Father Diaz said, before the Holy See asked for your consent, it had already made investigations in Rome and received the approval of Father General. It is not necessary for you to go to see Father Marshal. He knows about it and has agreed to it. And he added that recently there was a priest in Austria who was appointed bishop by the Pope. Everything had already been arranged, when suddenly he ran away on the eve of the consecration. After this, the Holy See issued a circular letter stating that, unless there were adequate and serious reasons, no priest whom the Pope appointed to be bishop should refuse the post. He should obey just like a diocesan priest whom the bishop appoints to a parish. He also said, "Try to consider seriously before God what decision to make. Write a letter to Monsignor Riberi telling him that you are going to make a retreat to think about this matter, and after thinking it over, you will officially reply to him." When I was leaving Father Dias' room, I thought to myself, let me ask another older priest and have his opinion before I decide. I immediately went to Father Vincent Luang Wauto's room. Father Luang had read the letter. He said, "In the present very difficult situation, it is hard to be Bishop of Canton. Bishop Antony Fourquet tried to make Father Peter Chan, Society of Jesus, a bishop, but later dropped the idea. Afterwards, he consecrated Bishop Bonaventure Nguyen Phuc Shek, but never gave him authority. Bishop Yang died later in San Fung County. The Holy See then asked Father Soi and others to become Bishop of Canton, but they were unwilling. Now they are asking you. I think this is a good opportunity for a Chinese bishop to take charge of the diocese. Do not miss this opportunity." In this way, Father Leng encouraged me to accept. At this time, I was anxious in heart. I returned to Sheki for an 8-day retreat, searching for God's will. As I knelt before the Blessed Sacrament, I was moved to tears. I thought that, at present, under the rule of the Communists, the situation was very bad and the circumstances extremely difficult. The diocese covered a large area comprising 15 counties. Relationships were strained and there was a lack of harmony among priests, sisters, and people. The diocese was poor. However, being a Jesuit, I thought I should submit to the Pope's wishes. I also considered the needs of the Church at that time. After a violent mental struggle, I finally decided to agree to accept the Pope's appointment to this post. After the retreat, I wrote a letter in Latin in reply to Archbishop Riberi. The contents were as follows. Dear Archbishop Riberi, I have received the decision of Pope Pius XII appointing me as Apostolic Administrator of the Archdiocese of Canton with respect and with gratitude. But, knowing that the territory of the Diocese of Canton is extensive and the population very great, and that I am a stranger to the diocese, and people now under communist rule, I feel it really difficult to accept this appointment. I remember that I am a Jesuit, and I ought to feel obliged to submit gladly to the will of the Pope. Hence, I have decided to accept my appointment by the Pope as Apostolic Administrator of the Archdiocese of Canton, and titular Archbishop of Elatea, with the sacramental character of a bishop, together with all the rights and obligations of a residential bishop. With a sincere heart, I beg the assistance of the Holy Spirit that I may worthily fill this post, and I beg you to pray for me. I went back to Macau again and saw Father Dias. He asked me about the Pope's appointing me as bishop. I told him that my decision was to accept the Pope's proposal. Some time later, I suddenly received an express letter through Father Leng from the Reverend Visitor, Father Paul O'Brien, Society of Jesus, asking me to go immediately to Macau to see him. He was then living and working in Hong Kong and had made a special trip to Macau to see me. He said to me, "I heard that you are going to be the Bishop of Canton, is that so?" I answered yes. He said, "It is better for you not to accept. The Diocese of Canton is very poor and the situation is complicated. You can't do anything there. It is best to turn it down." I told him that I had given in and consented and could not turn it down now. "Why didn't you tell me first?" he asked. I said, "Because it was a secret of the Holy Office." He said, "Oh, so it has already reached that stage. I heard about the matter from Monsignor Riberi when I came down from Nanjing, but I didn't think it had been fixed. Now, since it's fixed, there's nothing to be said about it." I asked him to pray for me. Then I immediately went back to Sheki. Chapter 2. Setting out for the new post. I was quite restless at this point. After a few days I received a letter from Monsignor Riberi saying, "I have received your letter and know that you have accepted the papal appointment. Go to Canton immediately without telling anybody. Stay in the Jesuit house at 225 Yuat Sao Pak Road, Canton. If the superior asks why you are there, just tell him that higher authority requires you to do something there. Wait at Yuet Sao Pak Road until the papal decree arrives." After I had received Monsignor Riberi's letter, I wound up all the diocesan affairs in Chuangshan County. At that time I was the vicar forane of Chuangshan, parish priest of Sheki Town, headmaster of Poling Primary School, and the person in charge of the Pui Ki kindergarten. I gave the parish of Sheki to Father Matthias Se Hua Pei, who died later in a labor camp in Qinghai Province. Father Si Yu Cho became headmaster of Poling Primary School. He died later in prison by swallowing chopsticks. Miss Quan Ziying took charge of Pui Ki kindergarten. It was just at that time that Father Simon Wong Lai Sao of Siu Lam village was arrested. When news of this came, fearing that I should also be arrested, I made some excuse about going to Canton to get away for a while, and without saying goodbye to anyone, I went there secretly to await the appointment. When I arrived in Canton on the 30th of December 1950 at night, it happened that in the area of Yuet Sao Pak Road, the electricity had been turned off. I took a pedicab to Yuet Sao Pak Road. The police stopped it and asked why I was coming to Canton. I put them off with some excuses, telling them that I worked in a school and that the books I was carrying were for my personal use only. On reaching Canton, I went immediately to see Monsignor Gustave Deswazire. He knew everything already. He said that he would notify me when the decree arrived. We then talked a little about the problems of the diocesan priests and financial and other problems of the diocese. I stayed in Yuet Sao Pak Road for about a month. During that period, I went to the Cathedral of Shek Shat to attend to the meeting of the Canton Curia of the Legion of Mary. Father Fong Shek Mui was the Curia president, Miss Chang Chi Hung the secretary, and Father John Omiara, Society of Jesus, the spiritual director. I also went as an ordinary priest to visit the orphanage in To Cam Hang outside the city, run by the Canadian Immaculate Conception Sisters of Montreal, MIC, and the Ho Nam Mary Knoll Father's Chapel and House. About a month after my arrival in Canton, Monsignor Jeshwarire gave me the decree of appointment. He told me to change my domicile immediately from Yuet Sao Pak Road to the bishop's house at Shek Shat. When I first arrived from Sheki, I had my residence registration under the name of the servant of St. Ignatius Parish, Mr. Wong Mao Luk, and I could not do otherwise, as the foreign priests like Father Chenise Egan, Society of Jesus, had a foreign residence registration. Mr. Wong then went to the police station for me to change my residence registration to the St. Francis Minor Seminary under the name of Father Andrew Yee-ming Tak as head of the household. In this way, I avoided registering in Monsignor Deshwazire's residence. When the change of registration was settled, I moved to Shek. On the 1st of February 1951, I held the ceremony of installation in the chapel of the bishop's house. The ceremony included the oath and profession of faith, etc. On the same day, I took charge of the Archdiocese of Canton. I then announced immediately that all priests would remain in their present positions until further notice. Chapter 3. Consecration as Bishop. Originally, we wanted to have the consecration ceremony in Shanghai because there were a number of bishops there, including Bishop Ignatius Kung, or Gong, Pin Mei, Bishop Simon Zhu Kai Min, and Bishop James E. Walsh. However, we feared that the communist government would prevent me from returning to Canton after that. For this reason, Father Omiara wrote from Canton to the Jesuit superior in Hong Kong to seek special permission from Rome to have only one bishop officiate at the ceremony. We also sent an express letter to Nanjing to Monsignor Ribéry asking the same permission. After a short time, the consent of both reached Canton on the same day. On the 15th February 1951, the border of Guangdong province was closed by the government. People going to Hong Kong and Macau had to apply for permits. We were afraid that the communist government would detain or expel Monsignor Deswazire. The priests in Canton urged me to be consecrated as quickly as possible. Whereupon preparations for the ceremony were made and the celebration was advanced from 19th to 13th February. On that day, the consecration ceremony was held in the chapel on the first floor of the Archbishop's residence. Monsignor Deshwazire was the chief celebrant, and the assistant priests were the Vicar General of the Canton Diocese, Reverend Andreas Chan Yiksan, and Father Joachim Lao Him Shreng. The participants include the diocesan priests and some foreign Jesuits and Maryknoll fathers, the Mother General of the Chinese Sisters of the Immaculate Conception, Senior Rose Chan Chi To, the Mother Provincial of the Canadian Missionary Sisters of Our Lady of the Angels, the Mother Provincial of the Canadian Sisters of the Immaculate Conception of Montreal, as well as the French Acting Council and the manager of the Banque Indo-Suez and others. The ceremony was simple but solemn, lasting an hour and a half. The same day at noon, Monsignor Deswazire gave a dinner in my honor as the new Bishop of Canton. All the priests of the city and suburbs were invited and attended. Bishop Deswazire made his congratulatory speech in Latin. He stated that, by accepting the appointment from the Holy See in these difficult times, the new bishop was showing absolute obedience and a spirit of sacrifice. I responded with a speech of thanks also in Latin. The Paris foreign missionaries have worked in the Canton Diocese with sweat and blood for more than 100 years, erecting many churches and converting many people into fervent Catholics, so many living temples of God. I will try my best to preserve them, to agree to be Bishop of Canton because I wanted to test to my own fidelity to God and to the Church, so I am acting from a spirit of sacrifice and not for any other purpose. On the night of the 18th of February, 1951, in the hall of the Bishop's house, the Vicar General, Father Andreas Chan, announced to the representatives of the faithful, "The Holy See has appointed Dominic Tang as Bishop of Canton, and from this day he has taken the place of Bishop Deswazire and has officially taken over the pastoral government of the diocese." On Sunday, the 19th of February, 1951, we had solemn high mass at 9 a.m. in the Cathedral of Shek. After Mass, the bishop went out to meet the faithful. Catholics had come from different parishes of Canton City to congratulate the new bishop. On the 20th of February 1951, I sent formal letters to notify the people's governments of Guangdong Province and Canton City of this appointment. On the 21st February 1951, I summoned all the priests of the diocese in the city to the bishop's house for a meeting to discuss the problems of the diocese. I announced publicly that Father Andreas Chan would be my vicar general, and Father Anthony Nagan Tang, the secretary of the diocesan curia, other offices remaining the same as before. Chapter 4. Financial Difficulties. During February 1951, the People's Government of Canton carried out the registration of house and land property investments of foreigners. The diocese summoned those responsible for every foreign religious community to discuss the matter and examine whether the religious community should register separately or together under the diocese. I appointed Father Andrew Lin, Father Aliosis Lip Sueng, and Father Joachim Lau to take care of the registration. The government had stated that the ownership of property would not be recognized if it was not registered. The day before liberation, in 1949, all the deeds of the property of the Canton Diocese were brought to Nazareth House at Pok Fu Lam in Hong Kong to be kept there. The perpetual lease of the Sacred Heart Cathedral and the adjoining land was kept in the French consulate in Canton. Before the registration, Monsignor Deschoisire had sent Father Aloysius Yip to Nazareth House and the French consulate in Chamonix to collect them. The registration lasted more than 2 months. Every morning our priests arrived at the Real Estate Management Bureau, REMB, of the city next to the office of the city government at 8 a.m. to queue up. The government working cadres were already very haughty when dealing with the common people. To the clergy, they were even more rude and arrogant. The deeds of the house and land properties of the diocese were all handed over to the REMB. Although the fathers asked a number of times for receipts, the government cadres refused to issue them from the very beginning. Soon after the registration had finished, the diocese suddenly received a notice from the REMB asking us to pay the taxes of all church properties within a limited time, including the taxes on all parish buildings, the Sacred Heart Cathedral, the Sacred Heart Middle School, Ming Tak Middle and Primary Schools, and Kindergarten, etc. Taxes had to be paid on open spaces, gardens, paths, and pavements also. Shekshat was taxed at the high rate for buildings in the city center. The total amount was 170 million old yuan, RMB. If taxes were not paid within a 40 days time limit, we would be fined 2 million yuan, equal to 200 new yuan for each day. Note, according to an article on Chinese monetary reform, 1 cent of the present currency is the equivalent of 100 of the old yuan. Lang Yin in the Hong Kong periodical Zhengmin number 91 for May 1985. For a few consecutive days after receiving the notice, we had meetings with the priests in the city, sometimes until late into the night, to study how to deal with the situation. Our unanimous conclusion was that this was the government's way of persecuting the church financially, and that it could not be avoided. To deal with the situation, we decided to take 2 steps. First, we would try to present a report on the difficult economic situation of the church to the relevant department. The church was not a production unit and was not able to pay such high taxes. So we asked the government to reduce them. Secondly, we would try to raise the amount of money so as to settle the matter temporarily in case the government refused our petition. I went personally many times with the priest to the Canton City Civil Administration Bureau and the main tax bureau to see the officials responsible and to explain our difficulties. But the request of the church was refused. I tried also to visit some well-known Catholics like Father Fung Chuk Man, whose wife Chan Zi Pik was a very fervent Catholic, and Father Kwan Pak Luk and others, asking them for help. They were happy that the bishop had come to visit them, for this was something new for the bishop of Canton. But for fear of trouble they refused, saying, "You can contact the government officials concerned." At this time the government asked the church to hand over the schools, Sacred Heart Middle School, Ming Tak Girls Middle School and Primary School, etc., and to join the Three Self-Reform. They also stated that if we did not pay the taxes and the fine, we could not rent or sell the houses or mortgage them to the bank, Bank Indo-Suez, for loans. It took us about 3 months to decide, finally, to use all our basic funds in Canton and remit the rest from Hong Kong. Including the fine, we paid 200 million old yuan, equal to 70,000 Hong Kong dollars, about $11,900 United States. The money was delivered by Father Andrew Lin and Father Aloysius Yip, and the secretary of the diocese, Father Pierre Narbias, MEP, used a small jeep to drive them to the People's Bank in Chuang Tai. The sum was big, and most of it was in $1 notes put into 4 sacks. They arrived at the bank about 2 p.m. The bank then sent 4 officials to count the money, and it was not until 5 p.m. that they finished their job. The diocese was on the point of bankruptcy. There was little money left. At that time there were 38 priests, some sisters, and lay catechists and workers. Our monthly expenditure was about 10,000 Hong Kong dollars, about 1,700 US dollars. The only thing we could do at that time was to divide the cash we had among the priests for their sustenance. Each of them got about 20 old dollars. In the beginning, the diocese gave to each priest $50 Hong Kong, about 20 yuan, as subsidy. They were given 20 masses each, with a stipend of 2 yuan for each mass. The total for those 2 items was 60 yuan. To tackle the economic crisis of the diocese, we, the clergy of the diocese, held some more meetings. Finally, we decided to rent the bishop's house and Catholic center to outsiders. Father Lin and others would be responsible for this matter. Luckily, that was the time when housing was scarce, so some people came to rent the place. From then on, we turned the minor seminaries of St. Francis into a temporary diocesan office and residence for priests. Some people advised me not to leave the bishop's residence, as that might affect the ideas of the Catholics, who would think that even the bishop had no place to live in. But I said I had to do this to pay the taxes and support the priests. At first we moved to St. Francis Minor Seminary. It was very good there. There were many rooms, a parlor, a garden, etc. It was quite comfortable. But because of the poor economic situation, we decided to move again to the Carmelite convent. This was the residence of the parish priest of the cathedral. It was a small place. The priests were then living together and were more united. The Catholics sympathized with us. At that time, many old pieces of furniture were piled up in the small courtyard of the Carmelite convent. There was nowhere to put them. Father Narbias chopped up some old pieces of furniture for firewood. We had no money to buy firewood. It was a great loss, but we could not help it. I dressed in short-sleeved shirt and trousers and worked in the garden. Some Catholics found it hard to look at us, for they had great sympathy with us. Chapter 5. New Financial Difficulties. In 1952-1953, the diocese received a second economic blow. The payment of taxes on our land and house property had exhausted the funds of the diocese. At that time, we depended on some houses being rented out and some fervent Catholics continuing to pay rent to the church. At Shekshat, there were about 200 houses rented out to Catholics to live in. At that time, the bishop's house and 2 other houses were rented out at a monthly rent of 3,000 yuan. Just at this point, one day in 1954, I suddenly received a notice from the Real Estate Management Bureau of Canton City asking me to personally go to the Municipal Administration Bureau for a meeting to discuss the problem of our properties. The meeting had been summoned, it was said, by the mayor. I had been sick and was convalescing in the Jesuit house in Yuet Sao Pak Road, so I sent Father Lin, and Father Yip to represent me. While they were waiting in the meeting room, a young cadre came in and shouting at them to stand up. He then read a decree issued by the mayor, Mr. Fong, stating more or less as follows. Since the Catholic Church is not handling its properties properly, it is decreed that from now on the Catholic Church, together with the Catholic Triple Autonomy Association and the government department concerned, are to form a temporary real estate management committee to take care of these properties. It was signed by the mayor, Mr. Fong. When we heard this, we called a meeting of all the priests in the city to go into the matter deeply. We pointed out that according to canon law, the church cannot allow outsiders to interfere in the administration of her property. All the priests had their say and agreed that the government was using this kind of tactic to force the Catholic Church to join the Triple Autonomy movement. Old Father Joseph Tang Wanshang remarked, I prefer to go begging rather than to ask help from the Triple Autonomy movement. Father Anthony Nagan said, Bishop, we cannot agree to other people robbing church property. The government has organized this temporary real estate management committee because, without doubt, it wants to rob us of our church property. If we send any priest to join this committee, it means that we recognize the organization as a legal one. We unanimously agreed that we would prefer to suffer again the trial of being financially oppressed rather than betray the rights of the church. We decided not to send anyone to join the proposed Real Estate Management Committee. Although the Bureau of Religious Affairs summoned us to attend meetings many times to discuss the Management Committee question, allotted us 2 places on the committee, and encouraged us to send representatives to join, we sent no representatives, and no priests wanted to attend. As a result of this, the priests manifested more unity. Later, the Real Estate Management Committee gave us 1,100 yuan each month. We used this money to help support the priests and for the expense of the diocesan office. After a few months, the amount was reduced to 750 yuan per month.